Hey guys, tonight we're diving into something you've probably never added to your gratitude list: not giving birth in the Middle Ages. Imagine this: you're trudging along a muddy village path in worn-out sandals, stomach queasy, your lower back already aching even though the sun's barely up. There's a strange tightness in your chest, a nervous flutter you can't shake. You're pretty sure you're pregnant, but there's no stick to pee on, no clinic visit, no Instagram reveal. Just a missed period, a gut feeling, and the unsettling awareness that this might be the most dangerous news of your life. Because guess what? You're not in 2025 anymore. You're in the 1300s. And being pregnant is basically playing biological roulette with no modern medicine, no pain relief, and no room for error. 1 in 3 women doesn't make it past childbirth. You're already behind the curve just by existing in this timeline. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? Drop it in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're a peasant woman, somewhere in a quiet hamlet of England or France, or maybe northern Italy if you're lucky. The village is damp, the roofs are thatched, and everyone smells faintly of onions and sheep. You're married, of course. Probably by 15, because that's just how it goes. The church said it was good for your soul, your family needed another alliance or farmhand, and no one asked if you even liked the guy. The first time you miss your period, no one pulls you aside for a chat about hormones or ovulation. Instead, the local healer might raise an eyebrow and sniff a sprig of sage ominously in your direction. Your mother-in-law narrows her eyes because yes, she lives with you, and starts nagging about preparing cloths for the birth. You're not even sure if you're pregnant, but the entire village is ready to weigh in. And here's the kicker. This might not be your first time. Maybe you've lost pregnancies before. It's normal, tragically so. Historians estimate miscarriages and early-term losses were incredibly common, but not talked about with much tenderness. You're expected to try again, always. As if your body were a medieval slot machine, just pull the lever and pray for a son. There's no such thing as prenatal care. You're still doing chores, scrubbing clothes in icy rivers, hauling buckets, and sleeping in a straw bed that squeaks with every shift of your swollen body. Resting too much might be seen as lazy, but moving too much could cause womb agitation, a made-up danger whispered about by old women whose medical knowledge came from folklore and half-remembered charms. You know what causes pregnancy, obviously. You're not clueless. But that doesn't mean everyone around you believes in science. There's still a camp that thinks your mood, your cravings, or even the phase of the moon had a say in whether you conceived. And if you've had trouble getting pregnant, well then maybe you were cursed. Or maybe someone buried a poppet, a little doll in your likeness in a graveyard. Better dig that up quickly. You start noticing changes. Your breasts ache. Your belly begins to swell, not neatly, but with that low, lumpy heaviness that makes your clothes strain at the seams. Your appetite fluctuates. 1 week, you're craving apples soaked in vinegar. The next, you can't look at food without gagging. You don't get sympathy, just smirks and mutters about how boys steal their mother's beauty. And yes, that's a real belief. In medieval folklore, it's said that if you look radiant during pregnancy, you're probably having a girl. But if you're tired, spotty and bloated, congratulations, it's a boy, and he's stealing your youth like some tiny prince of darkness. Historians still argue whether these old gender prediction ideas were just idle chatter, or if they shaped how expectant mothers were treated. You're scared, of course, but fear isn't discussed openly. You're supposed to trust in God and accept whatever comes. That means no complaining, no screaming when your hips start to ache, and definitely no crying about how many women die in childbirth. Because they do. All the time. You've heard the stories. You might have helped wash the body of a friend who didn't survive. You probably prayed at her burial. Death in childbirth is so common. There are entire saints dedicated to protecting women in labor, like Saint Margaret of Antioch, who burst from the belly of a dragon and became the go-to spiritual emergency contact for pregnant women. You might wear her medallion or keep her name stitched into your bedding. Maybe a relic of hers is kept under your mattress, probably fake, but hey, you're not picky when your life is on the line. There's also a big social toll. Being pregnant doesn't mean you're safe or protected. It can actually make you more vulnerable, especially if you don't have a husband. Unmarried and pregnant scandal. Shame. Whispers that maybe you were seduced by a traveling minstrel, or worse, a demon in disguise. Remember, the church has a lot to say about how babies are made, and most of it involves sin. And if you've been pregnant too many times too fast, people start muttering about your morality, or whether your womb's been bewitched. One French text from the 12th century blames excessive pregnancies on a wife too fond of her husband. Imagine getting side-eyed for liking your spouse too much. There's a growing pressure too to start preparing for the worst. Women in this era often make their will around the 7th month of pregnancy, not because they're dramatic, but because it's practical. You might not be here in a few weeks, and if you've got a small dowry or precious heirlooms from your mother, you want to make sure they end up in the right hands. This sense of finality hangs over you like a fog. You're still smiling for neighbours and helping churn butter, but every little ache feels like a warning bell. Every kick in your womb could be a miracle or a sign of impending disaster. There's no doctor to reassure you, no hospital bed to lie in. Just you, your swelling belly, and a house full of people who expect you to keep going no matter what. And if something feels wrong, really wrong, what do you do? Maybe there's a travelling barber surgeon nearby. He might have rusty tools and a scary amount of confidence. But chances are you'll rely on the local midwife. She's old, blunt, and half feared by the town, but she knows more about birth than anyone. Of course, if something goes badly, she might also be blamed for witchcraft. Just another delightful complication, as your due date. Not that anyone's counting exact weeks creeps closer, the nights feel longer. You lie awake listening to owls and wondering if your child will live. If you'll live. If the saints will intercede, or if this is where your thread gets snipped by fate. Because in the Middle Ages, pregnancy doesn't just mean hope. It means hovering at the edge of life and death, hoping your name is not the next one whispered at morning mass. You're still pregnant, and you're very much still in the Middle Ages. That means your business isn't just your business. Not even close. Your uterus has become the village's most talked about mystery, second only to the time old Walter claimed he saw a mermaid near the mill pond. Word of your condition has spread like candle wax over parchment, and now everyone has something to say. It starts small. The baker's wife insists you need to rub goose fat on your belly every night to keep the child from turning. The local priest starts dropping by with unsolicited spiritual advice about staying pure in thought, because apparently your baby can absorb your sins like a sponge. Meanwhile, your husband's mother is suddenly very involved, hovering over your every breath, clucking when you walk too fast or not fast enough. Privacy. That's just not a thing. You live in a one-room house, two if you're fancy with family piled on every surface. There's no shutting a door and taking a moment to yourself. If you want to whisper your fears, you'll have to do it to the cows in the shed or the saints in your prayers. And the opinions? Oh, the opinions. Everyone's got one. What you should eat, what position you should sleep in, whether you should let the baby feel the sun or avoid the outdoors entirely in case evil spirits slip in through your pores. One neighbour tells you to wear red to protect your child from the evil eye. Another swears that only lazy women give birth lying down and you'd better squat like your grandmother did or else. You're not just carrying a child, you're carrying expectations, superstitions, and a heavy load of judgment wrapped in homespun linen. Even your cravings become public property. That time you begged your husband for honeyed figs, the whole town heard about it. Some thought it was cute. Others took it as a sure sign you were having a girl because only female babies want sweet things. A few older women exchanged worried glances. Figs are warming, and too much warmth could in theory overcook the baby. That's not a joke. In medieval medical theory, especially under the influence of Galenic medicine, the womb is a furnace of sorts. Keeping it balanced is essential. Too hot, risk of miscarriage. Too cold. The baby might be born weak or lacking spirit. The humours must be managed blood phlegm, black bile, yellow bile, all in their proper proportions. And if you don't understand how to manage that balance, don't worry, nobody really does. Not even the so-called professionals. Historians still argue whether midwives used humour-based treatments based on medical training, or just repeated what they'd heard their mentors say decades earlier. Still, the advice keeps coming. Avoid eels, they're slippery, and some say their energy transfers to the child, making it deceitful. Eat plenty of barley and lentils. Drink warm ale, not cold, because cold drinks tighten the womb. But not too much ale, or the baby could be born with trembling. You sit at the hearth with women who've been through this before, listening as they trade birth stories like battlefield veterans. One woman boasts that she gave birth in an hour flat, standing no less. Another brags about how she delivered her twins during a lightning storm and only fainted once. They all eye you with that look, part sympathy, part, let's see if you're as strong as we were. And if you express worry, just a hint, maybe something like, what if I'm not ready? Someone will quickly tell you to stop. Fear is bad for the baby. It invites evil in. One old widow swears she knew a girl who whispered her fears aloud, and the baby came out blue. No one could explain it, but clearly she'd tempted fate. Then there's the church. Oh yes. Religion is your shadow, now constantly hovering. Pregnant women are considered sacred and suspicious. You are both honoured as the vessel of new life and watched carefully in case that new life came through sinful means. The priest might bless you, yes, but also might warn you about unclean thoughts. After all, St. Augustine famously worried about lust in marriage, and somehow that theological anxiety trickled all the way down to you, hunched over a laundry tub with a sore back and a racing heart. Even your dreams are analysed. Dreamed of fire. Your child will be bold. Dreamed of falling miscarriages coming. Dreamed of animals. Better hope it was a lamb, not a snake. In fact, just try not to dream at all. It's safer that way. Your husband doesn't know how to help. He's not cruel necessarily, though some are. He just doesn't know what to do with your moods, your tears, or the way your ankles have swollen like loaves of rising dough. He's been told to avoid you when you're emotional. And in some parts of Europe, he might even be expected to abstain from touching you entirely for months, lest he confuse the child's spirit. Whatever that means, sometimes he tries to lighten the mood. Maybe brings you a flower from the field. Maybe jokes that you're glowing. But mostly, he just looks nervous. He's seen what birth does. He's buried sisters, maybe even a first wife, whose last words were screams from a blood-soaked bed. As for you, you're supposed to find comfort in ritual. You sew baby clothes, usually hand-me-downs. You prepare linen wrappings for yourself and the newborn. You might make a birthing girdle, a long strip of cloth decorated with prayers meant to be wrapped around your belly during labour. One such girdle preserved in a London museum even has a smear of blood on it, a ghostly relic of one woman's desperate hope. You may also visit a sacred site, a local shrine to the Virgin Mary. Maybe leave an offering, a ribbon, a lock of hair, a single coin if you have it. There's a tiny chance the local monks will let you touch a relic, a saint's bone, or a splinter of the true cross. Is it real? Who knows? But in this world, belief carries weight. And that belief is a double-edged sword. If something goes wrong later, people won't just wonder what happened. They'll wonder what you did. Did you anger the saints? Did you skip Mass? Were you disrespectful to your mother-in-law? Even giving birth is moralized. If you scream too much, you're seen as weak. If you're silent, you might be faking piety. There is no winning, only surviving. Yet through all this, you begin to feel it, the shift in your body, the subtle rearranging of your insides. The baby moves. At first it's like fluttering, then bumps, then solid, unmistakable kicks. And as much as the world outside pokes, prods, and judges for just a moment, it's you and this tiny life communicating in secret. You place a hand on your belly, maybe smile, maybe flinch, maybe whisper a promise to the unborn. You will do your best. You will try to live. Because in a world where everyone has a say in your pregnancy, the only voice that matters in the quietest hours is your own. The days stretch longer. Your back is a battlefield. Your legs ache in ways that feel strangely permanent, like maybe you'll never walk quite the same again. The village is humming with spring, or maybe it's a bitter winter, but either way, your body doesn't care. Your body is focused on one thing, and one thing only: preparing for the birth. And believe me, it's not going to be a spa day. Labor is coming. You can feel it in your hips, in the way your center of gravity has shifted, in the way the women in your village start giving you long-loaded looks. Not the casual, nosy glances from before, but that deep, quiet knowing. They've seen this before. They know what comes next. And they know there's no stopping it. You've heard the stories, some whispered, some proudly retold over baskets of laundry. One woman gave birth after 3 days of agony. Another bled so much the chickens were banned from the house for fear they'd start pecking. One girl, the blacksmith's daughter, died on the floor, gripping a clove of garlic and muttering Ave Marias. Her ghost still gets blamed for cold breezes near the hearth. You try not to think about it, but your mind betrays you. Every little pain, every cramp, every strange tightening in your belly sends alarm bells through your spine. Is this it? Is it starting? You don't want it to, but you kinda do. The waiting is the worst part. It's like standing at the edge of a cliff, blindfolded, knowing you'll be pushed. You just don't know when. There's no due date, no countdown app, no baby shower. Just the slow ticking of nature. Your womb knows what to do, even if the rest of you doesn't. Eventually, your water breaks. Not in a dramatic gush like the movies, more like a confusing leak that makes you wonder if you just sat in something wet. There's no rush to the hospital, no 911, just the urgent clatter of feet as someone runs to fetch the midwife. She arrives within the hour midwives always do. They're the real MVPs of medieval birth. Hardened women with calloused hands, practical minds, and zero time for nonsense. This one smells of dried herbs and wood smoke. She looks you up and down and nods like she's sizing up a cow at market. Then she starts barking instructions, not unkindly, just urgently. Boil water, heat bricks, strip the bedding. Your world condenses to a single room. Probably the same one you sleep in, maybe the same one you were born in. The floor is covered in Russia's dried reeds, scattered to soak up blood and other less poetic fluids. You lie on a straw-stuffed mattress, or maybe sit on a birthing stool if you're lucky enough to have one. It's a hollowed-out wooden chair with a hole in the seat, designed so gravity can do its thing. A few other women come in, neighbours, maybe your sisters. No men allowed, except for the rare case when your husband insists. And even then, he stands awkwardly by the door, clutching a cloth like it might ward off blood. This room becomes your universe. It smells like sweat and tallow lavender water and hot bread. Candles flicker in the corners. The Virgin Mary watches from a carved wooden icon. Someone murmurs prayers. Someone else is already crying quietly, which is either really touching or really ominous. Hard to say. And then the pain begins. You've never felt anything like it. It starts low, wrapping around your spine like a hot belt. Then it pulses stronger, insistent. Your body takes over. You groan. Maybe scream. No one tells you to be quiet. It's understood that this is one of the only times in your life you get to be loud. Still, not everyone approves. In certain parts of Europe, women are told to suffer in silence, to bear the pain with saint-like patience. After all, Eve sinned, and now all women must pay the price in childbirth. One German text says rather helpfully that pain in labor is a woman's just punishment. Charming, right? Historians still debate whether women internalize these beliefs, or simply nodded along while muttering swears under their breath. Either way, you're definitely not thinking about theology right now. You're focused on surviving. The contractions grow closer, more intense. You grip the edges of the stool or the sheets or someone's hand. The midwife checks your progress with fingers her hands steady and stained with experience. She mutters something about good hips or maybe stubborn baby. It's hard to tell over the noise. You're sweating like a smithy's apprentice. You're swearing. You're crying. You're laughing inexplicably when one of the women makes a joke about how the baby's taking its sweet time because it doesn't want to meet your husband's ugly face. The room is hot, then cold, then spinning. Your vision tunnels, and then pushing. It feels like your body is splitting open. It kind of is. The pressure is unbearable primal, like trying to force an entire world through a pinhole. You push until you think you'll pass out. You do pass out briefly. You wake up to someone slapping your cheeks and whispering your name. Finally, there's a gasp, a squelch, a sudden wet, wailing noise that cuts through the room like a blade. You did it. It's a baby. It's your baby. They hold it up to you, blooded and screaming, and you're too tired to feel anything but a wave of relief so big it nearly crushes you. You cry. They clean the child, kind of. Maybe just a quick wipe down with a linen cloth, a dab of wine on the umbilical stump. No sterile gauze, no antibiotic cream. If you're very lucky, they'll wrap the cord with a charm or say a blessing to keep infection away. You ask if it's a boy or a girl. The room pauses. Someone whispers, "A girl." And in that moment, the air shifts just slightly. Not disappointment, not outright, but the unspoken truth settles in. Boys inherit land, carry the family name. Girls marry or don't. Their future is harder, like yours. Still, you love her instantly. Or maybe you don't. Maybe you're too numb. That's okay. You've lost a lot of blood. You're exhausted. Your body is still contracting, trying to expel the afterbirth, a messy, painful second act no one talks about enough. The placenta comes out with a wet flop. Someone wraps it in cloth. In some villages, it's buried near the doorstep to protect the child. In others, it's thrown into the fire. In Iceland, one tale says that if a dog eats it, the baby will grow up to be fearless. Don't ask how they figured that out. And you're still bleeding. That's normal. For now. But it has to stop eventually. If it doesn't, well, someone gives you broth. Someone else sings a lullaby. You close your eyes and wonder if you'll wake up. But you do, for now at least. You survive the birth. But this story, it's just getting started. You've given birth. You've cried, bled, screamed, and survived. And now you're not done, not even close. Because in the Middle Ages, the 40 days after you deliver can be almost as dangerous as the birth itself. Your body is a battlefield. You've just fought through the trenches of labor, but your wounds are still wide open. Your uterus is busy shrinking back down to something vaguely manageable. Your muscles are trembling from the strain. Your breasts are swollen, leaking sore, and possibly infected, though nobody's calling it mastitis yet. They're just calling it bad milk, and they might try to fix it by smearing butter on your chest or reciting prayers over your nipples. You're expected to rest, but also to feed the baby, change its wrappings, endure visits from every woman in the village, and pretend like you're not one sneeze away from falling apart. And here's the thing, you're still considered unclean. That's not an insult. It's an official label. For the next month and a half, you're in what's called the lying-in period, also known as churching time. It's a strange limbo. On one hand, you've performed the miracle of life. On the other, you've just ejected a blood-covered human being from your body, and that's apparently spiritually alarming. You can't go to church. You can't touch consecrated items. In some places, you're not even supposed to prepare food for others, in case your unclean state passes on through bread or broth. You're considered vulnerable, not just physically, but spiritually. Thin-skinned to the world of demons according to some texts. So, what do? You lie still mostly. Wrapped in thick blankets close to the fire if it's winter. Sometimes on fresh straw if your family can afford the luxury. You drink broth if there's meat. More likely you sip thin ale and chew whatever dry biscuit someone remembers to bring. And your baby always near, either swaddled beside you or passed around gently between the other women. She doesn't have a name yet. That comes later after baptism, because she's still in danger too. In fact, the first week after birth is considered perilous for both of you. So much can go wrong. Infection, fever, bleeding. bad air, and no one really understands why. There's no germ theory yet, no Louis Pasteur in shining academic armor. Just a mishmash of theories in balance of humors, foul mists, maybe divine punishment. If your bleeding continues too long, someone might suggest applying a poultice of crushed beetles and vinegar. No, seriously, that was a thing. Or a tight binding around your belly to keep the womb from wandering. Yep, womb wandering. A favorite medieval diagnosis. If a woman began acting strangely hallucinating, panicking, trembling, some believed her uterus had physically moved around inside her body and was climbing toward her heart. The cure. Smelling strong herbs placed near the nose and something foul near the pelvis to lure the womb back down. Historians still argue whether anyone actually witnessed this supposed phenomenon or whether it was an early form of explaining postpartum psychosis. But while you rest, the world around you keeps turning. The midwife still drops by to check on you, or perhaps to cast protective charms on your baby. Maybe she rubs salt on the infant's lips to keep evil from entering. Maybe she ties a red thread around her wrist. The church sometimes frowns on these rituals, but out here in the countryside, folk traditions run deep. You may also find yourself being watched closely, not just by neighbors, but by people looking for signs of something unnatural. Because unfortunately, in the Middle Ages, women who recover too fast, or babies who are too perfect, sometimes raise suspicion. Yes, there are whisperings of changelings. If your baby doesn't cry much, or has eyes that seem too old, someone might mutter that it's a fairy child swapped in the cradle by spirits. The solution. You could try to scare it back, hold it over fire briefly, or pretend to throw it into water. Risky, yes. But people believed it, and worse, some followed through. No one wants to admit it, but a colicky baby, or one born with a disability, could become the subject of fear. And you already exhausted, leaking and half-conscious, you're in no position to argue. You just nod and cradle your child tighter. And then at last comes the baptism. It has to happen quickly. Infant mortality is high, sometimes higher than 30% in the first year. So the church insists on baptizing babies as soon as possible, sometimes within hours of birth. In cities, priests might be on call ready with holy water and incantations. In villages, it's a race to the church, no matter the weather. If the baby seems weak, the midwife might do an emergency baptism at home. A few drops of water, a hurried prayer. In some cases, she might even fake a full baptism to calm the family, whispering just enough Latin to make it convincing. Historians still argue whether these acts were accepted, frowned upon, or quietly encouraged by the church under desperate circumstances. Once baptized, the baby is considered protected. Their soul has a name. Their fate is sealed, kind of. And you're not far behind. Once your 40 days are up, and assuming you're still alive and not a pale ghost floating around the rafters, you're ready for your own rite of passage. It's called churching. It's not about welcoming you back to normal life. It's a purification ceremony. You dress in your best clothes, possibly the same gown you wore to your wedding. You walk or are carried to church holding a candle. The priest says a prayer over you, thanking God for your safe delivery, while subtly suggesting you're no longer unclean. And then, just like that, you're back in circulation. Back to your usual chores: spinning, baking, laundry, animal care. Your lying-in period is over. But something's different now. You've crossed a line. You've faced death and made it back. Not everyone does. 1 out of every 100 women dies in childbirth. More in some places. You know names. You've seen the graves. You've whispered over them when no one else was listening. Now you carry something else, something heavier than a baby. You carry the knowledge that you're not immortal, that your body is not your own, that motherhood in this world is less about softness and lullabies, and more about endurance. Still, life must go on. The baby cries. You nurse her, you rock her, you sleep in snatches and eat when you can. Someone brings you stew. Someone else gives you a new spindle of wool. You're officially a mother now. Not the Instagram kind, not the baby milestone photo kind. The keep the child alive with 2 hands and a prayer kind. The medieval kind. And even though the worst may be over, you can't shake the feeling that something else is coming. Because it always is. The days pass in a blur of feedings and fevers, soft lullabies and harder truths. You've survived childbirth, yes, but now comes the long, quiet gamble of survival. And not just for you. Your baby is fragile in ways you never imagined. Every cough, every silence that stretches too long between breaths makes your stomach drop like a stone in a cold pond. You keep a finger under her nose at night, just to feel the faint whisper of air. You don't sleep. Not really. Just doze with one eye open, ears tuned like a wolf to every rustle and hiccup. And yet even with all this vigilance, death hovers. You can't see it, but you feel it brushing past, lingering near the cradle. In the Middle Ages, infant mortality is the unspoken backdrop to motherhood. It's not just common, it's expected. Entire family trees are dotted with tiny crosses beside unnamed children. Some mothers won't even name their baby until after the first month, superstition mixed with self-preservation. Why grow attached to someone who might not stay? Your little one is swaddled tighter than seems reasonable, wrapped up like a soft little loaf, with only her face peeking out. Swaddling isn't just tradition, it's considered essential. Keeps the limbs straight, they say. Prevents deformity. Of course, modern historians suspect it also restricts natural movement and might even contribute to hip problems, but hey, your options are limited. Besides, unswaddled babies are thought to grow up wild. You feed her the only way you can with your body. Your breasts are sore, cracked, sometimes burning. If your milk doesn't come in, or if it goes bad, because yes, bad milk is a feared condition, the village wet nurse steps in if you can afford her. If not goat's milk, maybe. Or a weak pap made from bread soaked in water. It's not ideal. Some babies survive it. Others don't. And all the while, your recovery is dragging. Slowly. Painfully. Your joints ache. Your lower belly feels like it's been kicked by a mule. The bleeding has slowed, thankfully, but every little twinge makes you wonder if you're about to keel over from something mysterious and medieval like childbed fever. It's not so mysterious, actually. Today we'd call it a bacterial infection. But in your world, it's a curse or a punishment or just bad luck. A slight fever, a pounding headache, then shivering, sweating confusion. Death often within days. There's no penicillin, just prayers and poultices. Maybe someone presses a heated stone to your abdomen. Maybe they bleed you. That always seems to be the go-to. Historians still argue whether women knew the dangers of poor hygiene, or whether they just couldn't do much about it. Midwives often washed their hands sometimes with wine, sometimes just with cold well water, but linens were reused, instruments were unclean, and if the priest came to offer last rites, you knew it was serious. You get lucky. The fever doesn't come for you. Not this time. Instead, you heal slowly, drifting through days of soreness and strange new routines. Your baby begins to cry louder. That's a good sign, they say. Strong lungs. And you start walking again. Creaky and unsure like someone twice your age. Soon enough, the visits start. First the midwife checking in with the baby's colour and weight. Then the wise women, some helpful, others mostly interested in sniffing your herbs and giving advice you didn't ask for. Rub vinegar behind her ears, one says. Soak her swaddling in ale, says another. Don't let her see her reflection until she's teething. That one's less clear. You smile, nod, and do whatever feels right. Because beneath the folklore and the frightening odds, you're still a mother. And mothers across all time do their best. Now, depending on your social class, your life might look very different at this point. If you're a peasant, you're already easing back into field work. Your baby is tied to your chest with a scrap of linen, and you're sowing or harvesting, depending on the season. You pause to nurse under a tree or behind a haystack. No one minds. Everyone's seen it before. You're expected to carry on like nothing happened, as if a human didn't just exit your body with all the force of a falling millstone. If you're wealthier, maybe a merchant's wife or minor noblewoman, you might have help. A wet nurse perhaps, if you're fancy enough. A servant to change the bedding to hold the baby when you're dizzy. But even with privilege, there's danger. Childbirth doesn't care if you have velvet bed curtains. Plenty of noble women die in those too, and sometimes the risk only begins after the birth, because now your fertility is back in the spotlight. You've proven you can bear children. Great. Time to try for another. Again and again. You'll likely spend the next decade or more in a cycle of pregnancy nursing and recovery. No birth control. Not really. There are a few folk remedies herbs, like pennyroyal and tansy, but they're unreliable and in high doses poisonous, so your body becomes a revolving door for life itself. And here's the cruel twist. If you don't get pregnant again soon, people start whispering. Maybe your milk is too strong. Maybe your womb is cold. Maybe it's the evil eye. Superstition seeps into every corner of postnatal life. Even colic isn't just colic, it's elf shot or the result of a curse from a jealous neighbour. To protect your child, you hang amulets over the cradle. Maybe a pouch of salt, maybe a sprig of rosemary. In some places, iron nails are placed under the bed to ward off fairies. In others, someone draws a protective symbol in ash across the lintel. It's a mix of religion and magic because when medicine fails, you try everything else. And then there's the naming. Now that she's survived her early days, your baby is granted an official name. Maybe you pick it. Maybe a godparent does. Names are often chosen from saints' calendars, whoever's day it happens to be, or from a family member, or simply something aspirational like hope or joy though. Let's be honest, medieval optimism has its limits. The priest announces it with a sprinkle of water and a solemn blessing. The baby is now a full member of the Christian community. Her soul officially stamped and filed in God's great ledger, but she's still yours. Even if the church claims part of her, even if the village watches her like a shared asset, you're the one who feeds her rocks, her kisses, her soft forehead when no one's looking. And in those quiet moments, you feel something primal and terrifying love, the kind that aches in your bones, the kind that terrifies you more than any childbirth ever could. Because now you've got something to lose. And in this world where survival is never guaranteed, that kind of love is the bravest and most dangerous thing of all. You're past the first few weeks now. Your baby's alive. You're alive. Which for the Middle Ages is kind of a miracle. But just when things start to settle, just when you imagine you might finally breathe reality, taps you on the shoulder, clears its throat, and reminds you there is no maternity leave here. Not unless you count being back in the field 6 days after giving birth as leave. Because as much as the medieval world worships the Virgin Mary and paints motherhood in glowing halos and gold leaf, everyday mothers like you're expected to bounce back with the resilience of a sack of barley. So if your arms work, your legs move, and your breasts still function, great, you're back on the job. Which job? All of them. You start with food. Bread must be made again and again every few days. The yeast isn't coming from neat little packets, but from saved bits of sourdough starter or a scrap of fermented mash. You knead with aching hands while your baby naps if you're lucky, or wails softly in her cradle if you're not. The oven is hot, the air heavy with flour and soot, and you sweat through your linen shift no matter the season. Then there's spinning. Always spinning. Wool, flax, or nettle, whatever's on hand. Your drop spindle is practically a third limb. You spin while walking, while talking, while nursing. A woman who doesn't spin is suspect, lazy, possibly even a witch. Yes, that escalates quickly. And laundry. Oh, the laundry. No soft detergents or washing machines here. It's cold water in a bucket, or better yet, a stream. You squat by the bank, your child strapped to your back, and scrub the family's linens with lye soap and raw knuckles. You smack the cloth against stones. Rinse, wring, hang, and start again. Your hands are never clean. Your fingernails are rimmed with dirt and dough, but your baby doesn't care. She finds comfort in your smell, earth milk smoke, and skin. You carry her on your hip, even when your back screams. You tie her to your chest with a strip of cloth so you can work with both hands. She rides with you through every chore, her tiny head bobbing gently with each motion. And speaking of hands, don't forget herbs. You're the family's first line of defense against illness. Fever. You brew elderflower tea. Worms. A little ground tansy root, cradle cap olive oil if you have it, or pig's fat if you don't. You've memorized a dozen concoctions from your mother and she from hers. Some actually work. Others are more superstition than science. Historians still argue whether certain remedies were effective or just smelled so awful that even disease fled. You also track the moon, the saints' days, and your husband's mood. You keep an eye on your store's flour, salt, dried beans. You barter with neighbours for eggs or wool. If your cow is producing, you skim the cream for butter, maybe make soft cheese. If not, you go without. Meanwhile, your baby grows. Slowly. Teeth start to press under her gums. You try to ease the pain with a slice of root or a cooled pebble. Some people recommend dried hare's brain as a teething charm. You do not ask where to find that. You settle for rubbing her gums and whispering lullabies. And as she grows, she begins to mimic you. Her tiny hands flap when you knead bread. She squeals when you card wool. She watches you like a second shadow, but it's not just you she watches. Because your house is never truly empty. There's your mother, maybe. Or a sister. Neighbours drift in and out. Older children dash through like whirlwinds. Someone's always bringing a story, a rumour, or a chunk of old cheese they swear is still good. And in this noisy tangle of people, your child learns what it means to be part of the living fabric of medieval life. She learns to listen for the church bell. She knows the way a dog barks when a stranger approaches. She hears the gossip about someone's cow or someone else's missing ladle. It's not just survival, it's community. Still, you don't get to put your feet up. Not even close. Because your body, it's already on the clock again. You start to feel the signs. The nausea. The sore breasts. The sense that maybe, not definitely, but maybe your moon cycle is late. Again. You whisper the thought to yourself before admitting it out loud. Not because you're shy, but because you're tired. Another pregnancy, so soon. You glance down at your infant, still nursing, still fragile. You're barely through healing, and already the world demands more. Your womb apparently did not get the memo about needing a break. This cycle will repeat on average 7 or 8 times in your life. You'll conceive, carry birth, and recover. Some babies will live, others will not. And your heart will break in different ways over and over. That's the rhythm of motherhood in the Middle Ages. Relentless, sacred, inescapable. And there's no romanticizing it. Not when the memory of childbirth still echoes in your bones. Not when you know that each pregnancy is a fresh roll of the dice, every time you risk death. Or worse, the slow agony of watching your child suffer with nothing in your hands but prayers and potions. Still you press on, because the community expects it. The church rewards it. Your family relies on it. And somewhere deep in your chest, something fiercer than fear keeps burning a kind of stubborn devotion that refuses to quit. Some days the baby laughs, really laughs, a bubbly, hiccuping little explosion that makes your throat catch. You kiss her fat cheeks and whisper nonsense words. For a moment you forget the laundry, the pain, the worry. There's only this, her warm body in your arms, and the flicker of something like hope. You don't say it out loud. Hope is fragile. It can crack under the wrong glance. Instead, you tuck her into her cradle with a dried lavender sachet. You hum until she drifts to sleep. Then you tiptoe to the hearth, roll up your sleeves, and get back to work. Because in the Middle Ages, motherhood isn't a season. It's forever. The days blur into seasons now. Your baby starts crawling, then toddling, wobbling over uneven floors with outstretched arms and a sticky grin. She still clings to your skirts when she's frightened, but she's beginning to pull away to explore the stone and straw world around her. And with that tiny independence comes a new fear injury. Because let's face it, the medieval home is basically a trap-filled obstacle course. The hearth is open and constantly lit. The cauldron hanging over it is heavy steaming and just the right height for curious hands. Rats scamper across rafters at night, dropping surprises into your drying herbs. Splinters jut from rough timber beams. The chamber pot sits quietly in the corner, half full, occasionally overturned by tiny feet. And outside, open wells, ditches, livestock hooves, an unfriendly geese. But even so, you let her explore. You have to. You can't carry her forever, not while you're still grinding grain, spinning thread, or helping with the harvest. You glance over your shoulder constantly, one eye always tracking that bobbing head, or catching the too long silence that usually means trouble. She tastes everything dirt, pebbles, beetles. You pry a dried mousetail from her mouth and try not to scream. It's fine, probably, so you teach her the medieval version of no. With your tone, your eyes a quick slap on the hand if you must. Gentle, but firm. You're not cruel, but you can't afford softness either. The world outside doesn't have padding. You have to prepare her for it. She begins to understand. She shadows you more responsibly, carries small bundles of kindling, mimics your sweeping. She's watching, learning, absorbing the way you talk to the chickens, the way you whisper a prayer over the bread. Childhood in this time is breathtakingly short. By 4 or 5, most kids are already helping with chores. And by 7, they're practically junior adults. Historians still argue whether medieval children were seen as little adults, or if they experienced some version of our modern concept of childhood. Some point to art and writings that show young ones playing with dolls, spinning tops, or chasing hoops. Others note how quickly kids were put to work or sent away to foster with other families, suggesting a cultural push toward maturity. Your daughter still plays, though. She stacks stones and makes little songs. She tucks a feather into her tunic like it's treasure. But when you hand her a wooden spoon and ask her to stir the pot, she nods solemnly and takes the task seriously. Her brow furrows in concentration. She's learning that she matters because she's useful. There's comfort in that, strange as it sounds. The medieval world doesn't ask children what they want to be when they grow up. It tells them. If you're a girl, you'll be a wife, a mother, a weaver, a dairymaid. If you're lucky, maybe a midwife. If you're very lucky and born into the right family, perhaps you'll enter a convent and read Latin prayers behind stone walls. But for now, your girl's most pressing goal is to avoid being bitten by the goose. Again, you get used to shouting warnings. Don't touch that. Come back here, not the fire. It's a daily performance of vigilance, one hand kneading dough, the other reaching to grab her by the hem before she tumbles into something sharp or hot or poisonous. Because let's not forget, almost everything is poisonous. There are no child-proof bottles, no warning labels. Belladonna grows just beyond the garden hedge. Hemlock pops up by the stream. You know to avoid them mostly from oral tradition. Your child doesn't. So you teach by repetition, by stories, sometimes by fear. She who touches the red berries wakes up in the underworld, your mother once told you. You pass it down without question. Fairy tales and folk warnings are your best defense against the quiet, deadly corners of nature. And then one day the cough starts. It's dry at first, almost dismissible. But then comes the wheezing, the listlessness. Her cheeks go pale. Her breath turns shallow. You hold her close and feel the heat radiating off her like sun-baked stone. There's no doctor coming, not unless you're rich. Instead, you call the village wise woman or the midwife. She brings with her a bundle of herbs, a small wooden crucifix, and years of practiced calm. You sit at the bedside, dabbing your daughter's forehead with vinegar water. You whisper prayers, maybe to Mary, maybe to saints, maybe to the forest, to anything listening. You offer your sleep, your strength, your own health, if she'll just get better. Sometimes they do, other times they don't. The sicknesses of childhood are relentless: measles, mumps, scarlet fever, the plague, though it comes in waves. You don't always know the name of what's killing children, just that they waste away or seize up or slip into sleep and don't wake. You've already buried one, or two. Most mothers have. The grief isn't quieter in the Middle Ages, it's just more expected. You carry it differently. You wrap it in practicality, in superstition, in the idea that God has a plan, even if it hurts. If she survives, and we'll say she does for now, she comes through it thinner, quieter, but stronger. And when she laughs again, it sounds like sunlight through storm clouds. To celebrate, you bake a honey cake if you can spare the sweetness. You tie a new braid in her hair. You whisper thanks under your breath and tuck away the tiny cloth doll she clutched while she was sick. A relic now. You think maybe this time will be different. Maybe she'll reach womanhood. Maybe you will too, because you're still young in theory, but your back tells a different story. Your teeth hurt more often. Your legs swell. You get winded from the well to the doorway. It's hard to tell how much is aging and how much is just the toll of everything you've endured. But when she wraps her arms around your waist and sighs into your belly, something inside you steadies. She is your proof that you did the impossible again and again and kept going anyway. Because in this world, love isn't something you say, it's something you survive for. Now she's older, 5, maybe 6, and though you still think of her as your baby, the village doesn't. Not anymore. To them, she's of working age. Not helping age. Working. You blink, and suddenly, she's no longer just trailing you through the fields or mimicking your broom strokes. She's carrying firewood, minding goats, fetching water. And she's proud. She wants to do it right. She wants to be seen as capable. You send her to the well with a smaller bucket. She returns arms, shaking, but smiling. The older women clap her shoulder and nod. The men grunt approval. She blushes under the weight of their attention. You can't help but smile too, even though your chest tightens. Because the more capable she becomes, the more she's pulled into the current of adult life. And there's no swimming back once it sweeps you under. You try to stretch her childhood where you can. You sneak her bits of honeycomb when the harvest is good. You hum her songs while combing her tangled hair. You let her sleep late once, just once, on a feast day, curled like a kitten in a pile of old wool. But the world is waiting, and it doesn't wait kindly. Your own duties have only grown heavier. You're likely pregnant again, your 3rd or 4th or 6th. You've lost count some days. Each time feels a little harder, a little riskier. You feel the difference in your bones, your breath, the way you fall asleep sitting up with a ladle still in hand. And while your body leans into the next cycle of life, your mind is busy with something else, her future. What happens when she reaches 12 or 13? Because that's when things change, fast. Marriage can come early here. Betrothals at 7 aren't unheard of, mostly among noble families. Yes, but peasants aren't entirely spared. A girl is considered of age once she menstruates. Some get lucky and wait until 15 or 16. Others are married off as soon as they're fertile. After all, the clock starts ticking the moment womanhood arrives. A girl who can bear children is expected to bear children. And that means soon, perhaps frighteningly soon, your daughter will stop being your little helper and start being someone's wife. This isn't a romantic proposition. No one's swooning. Dowries might be involved, or land trades or agreements struck over barrels of ale. Your say in it limited. Her say in it even less. Still you scheme in small ways. You angle for a boy you know is kind. You talk to his mother in whispers after mass. You observe which lads don't pull the cat's tail or steal from the alms box. You hold these tiny notes like secrets pieces of a map you're drawing without ever saying so aloud. Historians still argue whether medieval girls had any meaningful say in their marriages. Some claim the church required free will consent. Others point to the harsh social pressures that made any real refusal impossible. In practice, your daughter will likely nod, keep her eyes down and do what's expected. Just like you did. If you're lucky, she'll stay nearby. If not, she might be sent to another village or even a noble household to work as a servant while waiting to marry. Fostering, they call it. Education of a kind. Except it's also isolation, vulnerability. You know how quickly innocence can vanish under the wrong roof, so you teach her, quietly, constantly. You teach her which herbs soothe pain and which might end it. You teach her how to bake bread with limited flour, how to barter without seeming too eager, how to listen more than she speaks. These are not lessons written down in books. They are survival strategies passed mother to daughter like heirlooms. And beneath all that, you try to teach her joy, to laugh even when the broth is thin, to find stars between the rafters at night, to make silly rhymes about saints and root vegetables. It's not much, but it's what you have. You also prepare her body. When her time nears, when her chest begins to change, when the red stains start to appear, you don't panic. You've been waiting for this. You show her how to fold the cloths. You explain the cramps, the bleeding, the rhythm of it all. You use euphemisms at first. The moon, the curse, the change. But soon you speak plainly, because she needs to understand her own body if she's going to survive it. Some women swear by powdered toadstool to ease the pain. Others by chamomile or mugwort. One woman in your village swears by soaking linen in wine and tucking it into the waistband. You try them all, noting what works, discarding what doesn't. The wine trick is mostly just an excuse to drink. She asks questions. You answer what you can. Some things you don't know. You still don't fully understand why some women bleed too long or why others stop altogether. Why some can't conceive or why others die from a simple fever days after birth. There's one midwife who believes the uterus wanders the body when it's empty, causing hysteria and melancholy. Another says it's caused by bad humours in the blood. You've heard of women drilled in the skull to let the demons out. You steer your daughter far from such talk. Instead, you teach her what you know: how to listen to her body, how to rest when she can, how to hide her pain when she can't, how to ask for help with her eyes if not her words. And just as she's beginning to grow into this new self, your next child arrives. This time, a boy. Your daughter helps deliver him. She brings water, she holds your hand, she mops your brow. Her face is pale, but her hands are steady. She sees everything. And though you try to shield her from the worst, there's no curtain between life and death here. She sees the blood. She hears your scream. She watches your body tremble as the afterbirth is expelled. And then, miracle of miracles, the baby cries. A healthy boy, pink, loud, greedy for milk. You cry too, not from pain this time, but from relief. She holds her new brother like a doll, her hair damp from exertion, her eyes wide with awe. You think this is how she'll remember womanhood. Not just pain, not just fear, but life. And now she knows. Now she understands what it means to be born and what it means to give birth, which means soon she'll be expected to do it too. Your daughter is growing taller now, her limbs longer, her eyes sharper, her voice quieter in public. The village has started to take notice. The old women mutter behind their spinning wheels. The men glance longer than they used to. One of them even asked if she was spoken for. You wanted to punch him. Instead you smiled, said she's still young, still under your roof. But you know the truth, you're losing time. She's on the edge of maidenhood, and with that comes 1,000 new expectations and even more dangers. Not all of them are seen. Every day, she walks through a world of invisible contracts. Don't laugh too loudly. People will think you're foolish. Don't walk alone. Someone might follow. Don't speak first. It's not modest. And definitely, don't be too clever. That's dangerous in a girl. She doesn't say much about it, but you know she feels it. The subtle tightening of space around her. The way her childhood freedoms have shrunk to a threadbare cloak. Her doll sits untouched in the corner. She's stitching her own chemise now. You watch her stitching, bent over the fabric with a furrowed brow, and wonder, will her life be like yours? Will she have to endure what you've endured? Marriage looms like a heavy cloud. You're not even sure who she'll wed yet, but you're already preparing her. You start with the basics: how to bake bread that doesn't collapse, how to scrub linens until they're nearly white, how to look a man in the eyes just enough to be considered polite, but not enough to be misunderstood. It's a delicate balancing act. You wobble between protecting her innocence and ensuring she survives. You teach her about hunger, not just the kind that grumbles in your belly, but the other kind, the one that men carry around in their eyes. That hungry gaze that sizes up women like livestock. You don't say it that way, of course, but she's smart. She picks up what you're saying. And here's the twisted irony: she has to be desirable enough to marry, but not so desirable she draws the wrong kind of attention. Medieval femininity is a paradox. Be fertile but modest. Be silent but cheerful. Be pretty but not vain. Good luck, sweetheart. So you armor her with what little you have: strong hands, quicker wit, a sharp tongue when needed, and a deeply internalized map of all the ways a girl can vanish if she steps wrong. Historians still debate how much agency medieval girls had in shaping their fates. Some claim young women navigated their roles with surprising skill, finding influence in the home, the church, or even in trades like midwifery. Others argue the system was too rigid, too male-dominated for much resistance. You don't argue, you just teach her how to move through it. The marriage offer finally comes. It's not terrible. The boy's a few years older, 14 or 15. His family owns a small plot of land, 2 pigs, and an ox, which is practically luxury. You've known his mother since your own childhood. She isn't cruel. Your daughter says nothing when you tell her. She just nods once. Her eyes stay on her stitching. You want to ask her if she's afraid, but you already know. Of course she is. You were too. The wedding is arranged quickly. There's no elaborate gown, no months of preparation. Just a crown of flowers, a borrowed wool dress, and a midday ceremony witnessed by neighbours more interested in the feast than the vows. She walks to the altar with a loaf of bread in her hands, a symbol of her role to come. Her husband carries a knife. Protection, provision, power. You remember holding her hand the day she was born. Now you watch her hands trembling as she becomes someone's wife. It's hard not to cry. Not from joy, but from the ache of what you can't protect her from anymore. You whisper in her ear before the vows, "Stay soft but never break." The priest blesses the union. There are cheers, there's ale. Someone plays a tune on a wooden flute. Your daughter's eyes flick to yours only once, and you give her the softest nod you can manage. That night she leaves your home. She walks away not as your child, but as a married woman. There's no honeymoon, just expectations. The bedding ceremony is brief, awkward. Some villages make it public. Yours is more merciful. Still, the pressure to prove consummation hangs over her like smoke. There must be a stain, a sign. Proof that she is no longer a girl. You pray it doesn't hurt too much. She returns the next day looking older, not physically, in her eyes. Like someone who's peeked behind a curtain they can't unsee. You hug her. You don't ask questions. You press a sprig of lavender into her palm. Put this in your bed, you say. It helps. And you get back to work, because life doesn't pause for emotional processing. The fields still need tending. The cheese still needs turning. And now you have grandchildren to anticipate whether you're ready or not. If she conceives quickly, she'll give birth within the year. If not, people will talk. Blame her, maybe blame you. Infertility is a curse, they say, a sign of God's disfavour, or perhaps a witch's meddling. There's a woman in the next village over who was accused because her daughter failed to bear a child after 2 years of marriage. They shaved her head and forced her to confess. You avoid her now, even though you once traded soap with her during Lent. You begin to whisper more prayers, quiet ones, just for her. Let her live. Let it be easy. Let her laugh again. She visits often. You slip her herbs under the table ones to ease nausea, ones to encourage fertility, even one to end an early pregnancy if needed. Not that she'd ever ask. But still, the girl who once danced in puddles now kneels at your hearth spinning wool and telling you of her neighbours, her chores, her husband's mood. You nod, you listen, you ache, because she's walking the same road you did, and there are no shortcuts. You knew it would happen soon, but still it catches you like a sudden gust in the doorway. Your daughter is pregnant. She confirms it the same way you once did, with quiet eyes and a hand resting low on her belly, not quite protectively, but almost. She's barely 15. She sits on the stool near your fire legs, tucked under her, and says it softly. "I've missed 2 moons." Her voice doesn't crack, but you can hear it trembling underneath like ice, just before it gives. You nod. You don't hug her. Not yet. First you reach for the pot of nettle tea and pour her a cup. Something familiar, something warm. Then you gently press your hand to her wrist and begin the questions. Any pain, any spotting, can she still keep food down? She answers each one. Matter of fact, you taught her well. But there's one question you don't ask aloud, because neither of you needs to. You both already know this is real. This is happening. Pregnancy at her age isn't rare, not here, not now, but that doesn't mean it's safe. There's an old saying whispered by village women: a girl delivers with her hips. A woman delivers with her bones. It's a grim way of marking the line between childbearing age and childbearing readiness. Your daughter, for all her maturity, still has the hips of a child, and now she carries life inside her. You remember your first birth. You remember the fire in your spine, the ring of pain, so intense you forgot your own name. You remember pushing for what felt like days, the midwife barking orders, your mother crying quietly in the corner. And you remember the silence that followed, the awful, breathless silence before your baby finally cried. Your daughter doesn't know that sound yet. She doesn't know how the world stills itself for a single scream. You want to warn her, but instead, you guide her. You begin her new education. First the foods: bone broth, boiled greens, soaked barley. You teach her to chew the grains slowly, to drink mint water for the nausea, to let herself rest, even when the goats are bleating and the laundry beckons. Rest is an act of resistance now. Then the signs: swelling ankles, aching ribs, a sudden craving for wild apples. Each one is a message. You teach her to read her own body like scripture, because if anything goes wrong, she'll be the first to know. You prepare the birthing corner in her small home, a pile of clean straw strips of linen, a bowl for washing, and the birthing stool passed down through generations. You scrub it until the wood shines. You don't know how many women have screamed into that grain, how many have clawed its sides and prayed for mercy, but now it's hers. Historians still argue whether midwifery in the Middle Ages was more science or superstition. Some say medieval midwives were deeply knowledgeable experts in herbs' anatomy and positioning. Others say they relied too much on charms and saints fumbling in the dark. In truth, you've seen both. You've seen women saved by knowledge, and others lost despite it, and so you blend both. You teach her the saintly prayers: Saint Margaret for safe delivery, Saint Anne for strength. You stitch a tiny charm into her mattress, a bit of thread soaked in holy water and dried under moonlight. But you also give her a real knife to tuck beside the bed, because faith is good, but steel cuts cloth. You don't hide the pain from her. You describe it exactly as it is. You don't want her surprised. It's like fire, you say. It starts in your back and burns down your thighs. But it ends. That's the thing to remember. It ends. She listens, jaw set, eyes steady. Sometimes you catch her touching her belly when she thinks no one's watching, whispering to it, singing low, soft nonsense songs. You remember doing the same. Still not all is peace and preparation. The gossip starts soon after her belly begins to show. Some women look at her with smug pity, so young, they say. Others whisper suggestions. Maybe the baby's too early. Maybe it's not her husband's. One bitter soul suggests it might be punishment for vanity, for pride. You bristle. You'd like to snap back. Instead, you take your daughter to market with her chin high and her hands full of cabbages. You speak kindly, but loudly. You let everyone see she's not ashamed, and you are not ashamed of her. The priest offers a blessing for her womb. You accept it, even though he still preaches that pain in childbirth is a curse for Eve's sin, as if pain ever needed divine permission to exist. By her 6th month, the village women begin to soften. They bring herbs, advice. One even lends her a padded cushion for the stool. Childbirth is one of the only things here that truly unites women. Whether you are a lady in a manor or a girl in a thatched hut, when labour begins, your world narrows to a few feet of floor and a single goal: survival. And then one morning her waters break. You are ready. The air is sharp with sage and pine. You've boiled the linens. You've stoked the fire. You've sent word to the midwife. And now your daughter groans. It begins slowly, as it always does. A cramp, then another, then hours of slow, miserable tightening. She cries a little. She throws up once. She grips your hand until your knuckles pop. You whisper to her. Stories, jokes, anything to keep her from slipping away into fear. The midwife arrives, grumbles that she's still too tight, too small, that this baby may take a while. You already know that. You know what's coming. She pushes for hours. The sun sets. Candles are lit. Sweat pours down her face. You wipe it gently with a cloth dipped in lavender water. The room begins to hum low and constant like bees in a hive. It's the sound of women, old and young, murmuring prayers, giving instructions, pressing her knees, rubbing her lower back. And then finally, the crown appears. The baby comes screaming into the world, slick and red and angry. A girl. You wrap her in cloth and lay her on your daughter's chest. Your daughter cries not from pain, but from disbelief. She did it. She lived. She brought life. You kiss her forehead and whisper, "You're stronger than the wind." And in that moment, with the baby's eyes blinking slowly and the fire casting golden halos around the room, you feel something fierce and bright swell in your chest. Because now she knows what it is to be the storm and the shelter, the vessel and the force. Now she is a mother. The village quiets down after the birth. Or maybe it's just that your ears have tuned differently, softened by the small new breaths of your granddaughter. She's tiny, wrinkled like a raisin, but her cry is strong, and she nurses like she was born for it, which of course she was. You watch your daughter cradle her with both wonder and terror. Her hands are still learning the weight of a baby, how the head lolls, how the warmth seeps through layers of linen like sunlight. You guide her gently at first, then more firmly when she forgets to burp the child, or when she tries to swaddle her too loosely. It's not easy, this learning. The nights are long. The baby wakes often, sometimes screaming, sometimes just fussing for comfort. Your daughter's eyes are ringed with exhaustion, her hair unkempt, her fingers calloused and cracked from cleaning and cooking even while she heals. You remember those days, when your own body was still sore, your insides not quite settled back into place, and everyone expected you to keep the house running as if nothing had happened. No maternity leave here. No village midwife checking in every few hours. Just spit-up stitches and judgment. And the worst of it, the fear. That creeping dread every time the baby coughs or refuses to nurse, or sleeps a little too long. You lie awake, listening for breath. Just a whisper of it. One night your daughter shakes you awake. She's holding the baby, pale and panicked. She's not crying, she says, eyes wide. You sit up, place a hand on the infant's chest. Still rising, still falling, just deeply asleep. You whisper, "Babies breathe different when they grow." Then you guide them both back to bed. This is what motherhood looks like in the early weeks. 1,000 tiny panics, 100 aches, a handful of soft victories. You bring her stews made with bone marrow and bitter greens to rebuild her blood. You help her bind her belly with cloth soaked in mugwort tea to soothe the soreness. You remind her not to lift anything heavier than the baby, though of course she does, anyway. There are no real breaks when survival depends on your hands. And just when she starts to regain her footing, the milk fever hits. Her skin burns hot. Her breasts swell painfully. She cries when the baby latches, teeth-clenched, eyes wet. You've seen it before. Milk fever, mastitis, breast infection, call it what you like, it can be deadly. You make a poultice from boiled cabbage leaves and yarrow. You help her express milk when she's too sore to do it herself. You whisper through the tears. Breathe. Just breathe. She gets better, slowly, but not all women do. Historians still argue how many medieval women died from postnatal infections. Some estimate as many as 1 in 5. Others believe the numbers were lower but still significant. All agree it was a time of sharp risk when a tiny fever could steal a mother from her child in a single night. And if it wasn't fever, it was bleeding, or retained placenta, or sheer exhaustion. But your daughter survives. Again, she begins to smile more. The baby starts to recognize her voice gurgling when she enters the room. Your daughter hums as she sweeps, now holding the infant tight against her chest in a sling made from an old tunic. There's peace in these moments, even joy. And then she misses another moon. You feel it before she says anything. Her energy shifts. She's quieter, less patient. A shadow under the eyes again. When she finally tells you flat-voiced, "I think it's happening again," you don't cry. You just start boiling nettles. She's still nursing the first baby, barely recovered, and now there's another on the way. No space for her body to rebuild. No real pause between the tolling bells of labor and labor again. That's the pattern, isn't it? In the Middle Ages, most women didn't stop having children until their bodies refused to carry more. Some bore a dozen or more, of which only a few survived. They called it the maternal treadmill. No breaks, no breaks. You remember a woman from your village, Agnes, who gave birth to 9 children in 11 years. She eventually went mad, wandered into the woods one day and never came back. Some say she was taken by fairies. Others just nod solemnly and say her mind wore out. Your daughter is stronger than that. But even strength has its limits. She's more prepared this time. She knows what labor feels like, what her body needs. But the fatigue is deeper. She walks slower. She sings less. You offer to take the toddler more often to give her rest. She resists, at first wants to prove she can do it all. But eventually she gives in. She brings the baby to you in the mornings, her eyes grateful and haunted. This pregnancy is harder. More back pain, more swelling. You massage her feet with oil made from crushed poppy seeds and warm tallow. She leans into the touch like a child herself. For a moment, she is your baby again. One night, she asks you quietly, "What if this one doesn't come out right?" You know what she means. The Middle Ages are not kind to infants. Diseases, deformities, fevers, failure to thrive. It's all so common it barely surprises anyone. A baby can be born blue and never take a breath, or be perfect for weeks then die of nothing you can name. And when that happens, people search for reasons. Maybe the mother sinned. Maybe someone gave the baby the evil eye. Maybe God just needed another angel. You don't say any of that. You just place her hand on her belly and whisper, "You're doing everything right." Because that's all there is. When labor starts, it's faster this time. Her body remembers. Still, it's not easy. The pain is sharper. The baby is bigger. Her groans become roars. The midwife barely arrives in time. You stay by her side the whole time, stroking her hair, whispering prayers. And then a scream, not hers, the baby's. Another girl. This one cries louder than the first. And your daughter, she cries too. But it's not fear, not grief. It's something brighter. Relief, gratitude, exhaustion. The two sisters meet for the first time the next day. The toddler reaches out a curious hand and touches the newborn's nose. Your daughter laughs, and it's the first true laugh you've heard from her in weeks. Later, after the baby is fed and sleeping, your daughter lays her head in your lap and says, "I think I'm done. I don't want more." You stroke her hair and say nothing, because the truth is she probably doesn't get to choose. Not here, not now, but tonight she rests. She's alive. They're all alive. And that's enough. The seasons turn as they always do, without asking if you're ready. By now, your daughter's house echoes with soft chaos. One toddler chasing chickens barefoot, one infant gurgling in a sling, and a young mother learning to live in halves. Half asleep, half dressed, half healed. You help where you can. You take one girl to gather eggs. You rock the other to sleep while your daughter finally eats a meal while it's still warm. But mostly, you just stay close. Because motherhood here doesn't happen in neat stages, it floods in wave after wave until you learn to tread water with a baby on your back. One evening, as your daughter sews a patch on a wool tunic, she says, "I can't remember what it felt like not to be tired." You nod. You do remember, but barely. And only because of the gaps. The rare airy spaces between pregnancies when your body felt like your own again. Those were fleeting. She hasn't had hers yet. And here comes the hardest part, contraception. Or rather, the almost total lack of it. People in the Middle Ages weren't clueless about birth control, but they were certainly limited. Some women drank potions made of wild carrot seeds, or pennyroyal herbs thought to disrupt conception. Others used linen soaked in vinegar, inserted like a primitive sponge. Some even tried animal membranes worn like sleeves, but success inconsistent, risk high. The church, of course, frowned upon it, or more accurately, smote it with righteous fire. Preventing conception was seen as tampering with divine will. Even midwives could be accused of witchcraft for suggesting anything that might interfere with nature's course. Your daughter, being practical, asks you one day, "Is there anything I can take to stop it from happening again?" You hesitate. You've heard whispers of a tea made from tansy. Effective maybe, but dangerous too. One woman in the next village took too much and never woke up. So you tell her the truth. There are herbs, but none without risk. She doesn't press. She just sighs and begins counting days in her moon calendar again. You see her marking them with coal, hopeful but wary. Instead, she focuses on spacing the children as best she can. Nursing, some say, can delay ovulation. It's called lactational amenorrhea, though no one here uses that phrase. Here they just say, Keep the baby on your breast and maybe God will give you a break. Still, you both know it's a gamble, and as if fate can smell hope, the next-door neighbour dies in childbirth. You hear about it from the baker's wife, who brings the news with a tone too casual for what it contains. Emily's gone, she says, breaking bread with a sigh. Second baby, bled out. Husband's looking for a wet nurse now. Just like that, you stare at your daughter as she processes it. Her jaw tightens. Her arms wrap instinctively around her sleeping infant. There's silence between you for a while, and then she murmurs. She was only 17. The next few days are quiet. Too quiet. Your daughter goes about her chores like a ghost. Her mind's 1,000 miles away, somewhere in the bloody straw where Emily took her last breath. So you decide to take her out of the village, a pilgrimage you call it. Not far, just to the woods, to the old stone altar where women leave ribbons and coins for fertility or healing. It's not officially blessed by the church, but everyone still goes there. You bring her there at dawn. The world is still blue and silver. Dew clings to your shoes, and birdsong fills the silence. She kneels and lays down a scrap of cloth, a square from the tunic Emily once made her. Then she whispers something too quiet to hear. Maybe a prayer, maybe a plea. On the way back she's lighter, not happy but unburdened. That evening your older granddaughter takes her first steps. Wobbly and wide-legged but proud as a goose. The baby claps in delight. Your daughter laughs again. This is what survival looks like here. Grief, then laughter. Death, then walking. The wheel never stops turning. And then, almost miraculously, no pregnancy. The moons pass, 1, 2, then 6, then a full year. It feels like a gift. Your daughter uses the time well. She strengthens. She starts mending clothes for neighbours to earn a little coin. She teaches the toddler how to count with beans and pebbles. She even begins carving wooden spoons in the evening by the fire, delicate and smooth, like something sold in a market square far away. But the village still watches her, always half curious. Still young, still capable, still in danger of too many children. It's strange, isn't it? Here a woman is both revered and judged for her womb. It makes her powerful but also vulnerable, like a candle lit in a breeze. Historians still argue whether women had any real reproductive agency in the Middle Ages. Some point to local customs where midwives quietly passed along family knowledge of spacing children. Others claim most women simply endured. No power, no choice. Just pregnancies until death or menopause claimed them. You suspect the truth is somewhere in between. Quiet knowledge, desperate hope, and sometimes sheer luck. And for now, your daughter has luck on her side, until of course the luck runs out. 2 winters pass. The girls grow taller. Your daughter's hair thickens again. Her eyes brighten. She even dances once at the spring feast, barefoot in the grass, laughing as the musicians play their crooked flutes. And then another missed moon. You can almost feel it like thunder on the horizon. The air shifts. The chickens go quiet. This time, she doesn't tell you right away. She waits a few weeks, hoping maybe that her body's just confused. But it's not. When she finally whispers, "I think it's happening again." There's no panic in her voice, just weariness, a bone-deep sigh. You don't say maybe it'll be easier this time, because you know better. Instead, you gather the herbs, ready the stool, polish the blade. Because here in the Middle Ages, pregnancy is never just a celebration. It's a calculation. How many mouths, how many hands, how many chances? Still, she carries on. Because what else is there? You barely have time to brace before the storm arrives. Her third pregnancy settles like a stone in her belly, heavier, slower, more demanding than the last 2. She groans more when she rises. Her ankles swell by midday. The toddlers tug at her skirts and she manages small smiles. But mostly she just tries to get through the hours. This time she knows what to expect. And that somehow makes it worse. Her body isn't bouncing back like it used to. Her hips ache constantly. She starts having sharp shooting pains down her legs. You massage her with mustard oil and try to help her rest, but you both know rest is a luxury now. There's a household to run, and 2 little mouths that ask for more than just food. They want time, touch, attention. She gives what she can, but her eyes are always cloudy, her voice quieter. And then there's the constant creeping fear that she won't survive this one. You hear it in her when she asks, What happens to the girls if I die? You don't answer with words. You just place a hand on her shoulder. The answer is too grim, too final. If she dies, they go to their father, who is kind but clueless or worse, to his aging mother, who still thinks teething is caused by demons. These are the thoughts she wrestles with while she sews baby clothes again, though this time without any excitement. Just a mechanical repetition. A mother's muscle memory. The months creep forward sluggish and cold. Winter sets in early. Food is tight. The roof leaks. One of the girls gets a fever, and though it breaks after 3 days, the worry sticks around like smoke in the rafters. Every kick from the baby is a reminder this isn't over, and it won't be not until the final push, the final breath, and a cry that either comes or doesn't. She labours for 3 days. It's the hardest one yet. You send for the midwife on the first night, and she stays until the bitter end, bleary-eyed and hunched beside the birthing stool. Your daughter barely speaks during labour. Just low moans, sometimes screams, sometimes muttered prayers. She sweats through 3 tunics. You sponge her face with vinegar water and whisper to the baby still hidden. Come out, little one. She's done her part. Time to do yours. When the baby finally emerges, it's quiet. Too quiet. For a second that stretches like rope, you think it's over, and then a sputter. A breath. A high-pitched angry wail. A boy. Your daughter doesn't smile. She just passes out. You catch her before she slips off the stool. The midwife checks her pulse, her breath. She's alive. Weak, but alive. And the boy squirmy, small, but healthy. It's a strange feeling, relief wrapped in terror. You spend the next few days watching your daughter like a hawk. She sleeps constantly, waking only to nurse. The boy latches poorly at first, but eventually figures it out. You have to help her sit up to feed him, help her lean back when she coughs. Her body is too sore to do much of anything. And you know what this means. This birth nearly broke her. So you take over. You manage the household while she recovers. You feed the girls, sweep the floors, mend the chicken's pen when a fox gets through. You barely sleep, but you do it 1,000 times again to see your daughter's colour return. It takes weeks, but she heals, slowly. Still, there's something different now. A quietness in her. Not sadness, just caution. She moves like someone who knows her bones have limits. Like someone who's seen her edge. And around her the world moves on. The villagers are buzzing. A boy. The first after 2 girls. The baker gives a small loaf as a gift. The neighbour sends over smoked fish. Your daughter smiles politely at the attention, but later mutters, "If I'd died, would they have sent trout then too?" She's bitter, and honestly she's earned it. Because in this time having a son is considered a victory, a prize, proof of worth, even if it cost you a piece of your soul. You remember being told a woman is only as good as the sons she bears, and you remember the sting of it when your first 2 were girls. So much of womanhood here is about surviving that double standard. You're praised for bearing children, but only if they're the right ones. You're honoured for sacrifice, but only if you don't complain. You're expected to give and give and give until you break and then still offer a smile. Historians still debate how much agency medieval women had over their roles as mothers. Some say village customs allowed women to shape their families, subtly influencing how many children they bore. Others argue that survival and societal pressure made real choices nearly impossible. From where you're sitting holding your sleeping grandson while your daughter groans awake, the answer seems pretty clear. She might want control, but survival has its own rules. But still she fights back in her own way. She spaces the feedings to extend nursing. She plants bitter herbs near the back door. She prays to Mary every night, not just for strength but for mercy. And she begins to talk to the girls differently, teaching them how to carry water without spilling yes, but also how to say no, how to be firm, how to ask questions, how to think. You see what she's doing. She's building them not just to survive, but maybe, just maybe, to change something, to live fuller than she has. And the boy, he sleeps a lot, eats well, doesn't fuss too much. But even at 2 months old, you can see it, the way people already treat him like a little king. One afternoon, a cousin stops by and brings him a toy carved from bone, a little knight on a horse. He's too young to even grip it. Your daughter's. They get a scrap of ribbon. Your daughter notices. She says nothing, but you see her stare at that night for a long time. You feel her resolve harden. Motherhood in the Middle Ages isn't just about birthing babies. It's about constantly trying to protect them from a world that wants to shape them before they even speak. So she pushes back where she can, teaches the girls to read letters, just a few from the prayer book, tells them stories about clever queens and brave nuns, shows the boy how to wait his turn, how to share, how to listen. They're small rebellions, but they matter. Because here in the drafty kitchen of a stone cottage with a fire that smokes more than it warms, and floors that always need sweeping, your daughter is doing something revolutionary. She's raising children who know love and fairness and strength. And she's doing it with a body stitched together by years of birth and loss and healing. This is the kind of motherhood they don't put in ballads. But it's the kind that changes everything. The seasons spin forward again, and this time your daughter meets them on sturdier feet. She isn't healed, not fully. You suspect she never will be, not in the way her younger self used to dance barefoot without thinking. But she's standing walking, carrying 3 children, and a heart that doesn't startle quite as easily. That counts as strength here. The boy is crawling now, headstrong and loud. The girls are growing like beans on a trellis, tall, chatty, always muddy. Life in the house has shifted from survival to rhythm. Wake, feed, sweep, stitch, tend, repeat. Your daughter manages it all, though she flinches sometimes when lifting too much, or when the baby kicks too hard in his sleep beside her. The echoes of her last delivery haven't faded. They just hide under the surface, like bruises beneath fabric. But now something new rises, fear of what comes next. Not for her girls. You see it in the way she watches them carry buckets or practice kneeling for evening prayer. She sees their futures creeping closer, because here girlhood ends early. By 10 or 11, they'll be learning not just how to make bread or spin wool, but how to behave in a world that already sees them as potential wives. Marriage, that word hits harder than it should, doesn't it? Your daughter was barely 15 when her first child came. And in this village, that was practically average. Girls are often married off shortly after their first bleeding. Not because they're ready, but because their families fear what might happen if they wait rumors, shame, or God forbid curiosity. So now your daughter stands on both sides of the story. She's still young enough to remember what it felt like to be married off, and old enough to dread it happening to her children. She starts asking you questions like, how soon did I bleed? Or do you think she looks like me at that age? And when you hesitate, she doesn't press, but the worry is all over her face. She's afraid her daughters will have no choice. Because truthfully, they might not. The laws, if you can even call them that around marriage, are patchy at best in this time. Canon law technically sets the age of consent for girls at 12, but in practice, cultural norms vary wildly. Some noble families betroth their daughters at 5 or 6 marriages finalized before they're old enough to string a full sentence together. And here among peasants, it depends on what the family needs. A hungry mouth, a strategic alliance, a way to settle debt. Marriage can mean all kinds of things. Love is almost never one of them. Your daughter has no dowry to offer, but neither does her neighbor. That doesn't stop marriages from happening. A pig, a good harvest, a promise of labor. Sometimes that's enough. So your daughter watches the girls, teaches them quietly, tells them that they're allowed to feel things, that they should speak, that their hands and minds matter just as much as their faces. It's subversive in its way, because the world doesn't teach girls that. The church certainly doesn't. Clergy sermons often center around Mary's obedience, her purity, her submission, all things expected of young women. Even in folk tales, the girls who win are the silent ones, the sweet ones, the ones who endure hardship without complaint. Your daughter, who knows hardship, intimately refuses to let that be the only story her girls learn. And yet she's careful, because people talk. They always do. You remember how the blacksmith's daughter got labelled loose because she laughed too loudly at the harvest feast. Or how the weaver's niece was sent to a convent for daring to run away from an arranged betrothal. The threat is always there. One misstep and the village can turn. Historians still argue how much girls understood about their own worth in medieval communities. Some say they internalized obedience from the cradle. Others point to folk customs and household matriarchs who subtly empowered girls through stories, songs, or ritual. Most likely, the truth lives in that grey in-between. Girls learned what they were allowed to know, and the rest they discovered on their own. Your granddaughters are lucky in that regard. They have a mother who remembers, and remembers too well. She begins taking them into the forest with her when she gathers herbs. She teaches them not just the names, but the uses. This one soothes cramps. That one can bring down a fever. That bitter root for when your belly needs to stay empty. You raise your eyebrows at that but say nothing, because she's right. If her girls can't choose when to marry, maybe they can at least understand their own bodies. A quiet inheritance of knowledge, passed woman to woman, whispered between tasks. The boy meanwhile grows louder. He bangs things, demands, throws food and grins while doing it. You can already see the difference in how people respond. Strong lad, they say. He'll make a fine tradesman. No one calls the girls strong. They're helpful, quiet, neat. It's subtle, but it builds. And your daughter notices. She starts pushing back in small ways. At the feast of St. Bridget, she brings only the girls to help light the altar candles, a task usually done by boys. When asked, she simply smiles and says, "Their hands are steady." Another day she lets the oldest girl read aloud from the Psalter, haltingly yes, but with focus. Some villagers frown, others scoff. But one old woman claps. Your daughter shrugs it off. She's done trying to please the crowd, and yet the fear never really leaves, especially when she hears that the tanner's son, 16 pimply too proud, is asking around about the oldest girl. She's 9, barely. The village doesn't see it as strange. He's just looking ahead, someone says. Your daughter sees it as a storm on the horizon. That night she tells the girls a story. It's not one from the Bible. It's one she makes up about a girl who turns herself into a tree to avoid marrying a bear. The girls giggle, not realizing yet what the tale means. But you hear it clearly. It's a warning and a wish. If only escape were that easy. So your daughter begins planting her plan. She starts working more hours, spinning thread for trade. Saving. Quietly. A few coins tucked into a jar beneath the hearthstone. You spot her checking it sometimes, counting under her breath. She doesn't say it outright, but you know, she's trying to buy time, to delay the day someone comes asking for her daughters, to maybe send them somewhere else. A convent perhaps not ideal, but safer than a rushed marriage. Or to a distant cousin in the city who might let them work in a shop and learn to read more than prayer books. She's not just raising children now. She's building a parachute. You help where you can. Add your coins. Teach the girls songs that are more than just pretty songs with coded advice passed from grandmother to granddaughter like charms. And you pray. Not to the saints, not this time. You pray to every woman who's ever come before. That somehow this cycle might slow, might soften. Because here in the Middle Ages, being a mother never ends. It just evolves. From surviving childbirth to trying to protect your children from it. Time does its quiet trick again, turning days into seasons and seasons into years. Your daughter's eldest is nearly 12 now. That age where girlhood starts to slip like soap through your fingers. She's taller, shyer, more inward than she used to be. Her laugh is still there, but now it waits before coming out checking the room first. She knows people watch her differently now, and they do. The baker's wife asks whether she's betrothed yet. The shepherd's boy nudges her on feast days and then runs away red-faced. Even the priest seems to speak to her more slowly, as if he assumes she'll forget what he says, despite her knowing every psalm he drones out. Your daughter notices it all, and she hates it. She keeps the girl close. Sends her on errands only when absolutely necessary. Walks with her when they go to market. And when someone mentions the tanner's son again, now 18 and still as awkward as ever, your daughter mutters a curse under her breath that would make the priest's ears boil. This is the invisible war she's been preparing for. The one where no swords are drawn but futures are stolen all the same. Meanwhile the boy is 5 now, a blur of limbs and scraped knees. He's got charm too already. People joke that he'll be mayor or priest or a merchant with gold to his name. No one says anything like that about the girls. Just, she'll make a good wife one day, or you'll have a hard time keeping the lads away. You try not to roll your eyes, but your daughter, she doesn't bother hiding it. She's tired of the game, so she makes a choice, a bold one. She sends the eldest girl away, not to marry, not to serve in someone's house, but to learn. She struck a deal with a distant cousin's husband, a scribe who works in a nearby abbey's lower offices. He's agreed to let the girl assist his wife in return for food and this is the key lessons in reading and record keeping. Not scriptures, letters, contracts, numbers. It's a wild plan, one that might fail, but she's betting everything on it. When your granddaughter leaves, she doesn't cry. She hugs you then, her mother, then gives her siblings each a squeeze. Her bag is small, her stride unsure, but her eyes hopeful. Your daughter spends the next 2 nights unable to sleep. She paces. She checks the jar under the hearth now nearly empty. She stares at the girl's bedding one space now cold. And you know what's eating her up. Did I send her away too soon? Did I make her a target by making her different? It's impossible to know. Historians still debate whether education like this was remotely accessible to peasant girls. Some argue that informal apprenticeships and literate family members could provide rare but real opportunities. Others believe even these small pathways were more myth than norm, with records favouring the exceptional cases that survived on parchment. But you know this, your daughter is trying to beat a stacked deck, and that takes more than opportunity. It takes courage. She writes to her eldest once a month, dictated to the village priest who agrees reluctantly, and she receives replies every few moons. Clumsy, sweet, full of scratched-out mistakes and questions about home. The last one ends with, "Tell Mama I miss her, but also, I love ink stains." It's enough to make you both cry. And while the girl learns to read, your daughter teaches the others to listen. Not just to people, but to everything birdsong that signals frost, the way bread dough feels when the yeast is tired, the look in a man's eyes when he isn't kind. These are the lessons no school offers. The boy watches too. He's clever. He knows his mother is different from the other women in the village. That she doesn't coo when he brags, doesn't let him get away with shoving his sisters. She teaches him how to stir porridge and change bandages. How to say thank you like he means it. He grumbles about it sometimes, but you see how it grounds him. And all the while the world hums on. One year a sickness rolls through. Some say it's just bad air. Others whisper about punishment from God. A few old villagers die. Your family scrapes by with salted broth and dried sage burning straw in the doorway to ward off death. It works or it doesn't. Either way, you survive. Another year the harvest fails. Bread gets thinner. Meat disappears. You stretch meals with roots and prayers. Your daughter gives the children her portion most days, chewing on boiled weeds at night, like it's enough. It never is. But the children stay fed. Barely. Your granddaughter sends a parcel during that time. Dried apples. A note with a shaky drawing of a candle. So you have a little light too. The boy doesn't understand why everyone cries that night, but he pats your hand like a good little man. Through it all, your daughter weathers each blow like a tree, flexing, never breaking. Her back hurts constantly now. Her hands are cracked, but her eyes, they're sharper than ever. She starts talking about the girls as if they're already women. She's clever with cloth, she says of the middle one. Could be a seamstress, or that one has a healer's touch. I've seen it. She's mapping futures, drawing escape hatches in her head. And you see a quiet pride in her that wasn't there before. Because somehow against all odds she's doing it. She's kept them alive. Not just breathing but growing. She even starts visiting the midwife more often not as a patient, but as an assistant of sorts. Learns how to recognize early signs of breech birth. How to clean a cut with vinegar. How to wrap a newborn in winter. She doesn't call herself a healer, not yet. But the village starts asking for her when the midwife is away. And with each woman she helps. She remembers her own births. Screams. Swallowed by stone walls. The cold sweat, the fear. She holds the mother's hands through it all. Tells them breathe. You can do this. And she says it with the weight of someone who's had to prove it 3 times already. By now the village has stopped whispering. They call her wise. Even the priest mutters less when she walks by. And when the distant cousin visits and reports that her eldest is now helping copy farm contracts, that she's quick with numbers and faster with words, your daughter closes her eyes. Not to pray, just to hold the moment. You reach for her hand. It's shaking. Not with fear this time. With something else. Relief maybe. Because motherhood here isn't just a role, it's a constant gamble. You don't get to win it. You just hope not to lose everything. And right now, she's ahead. The days have settled into something almost gentle now. Not easy, never that, but steady. Predictable even. The kind of rhythm you only get after years of holding the world together with fraying string and stubborn hope. Your daughter, now in her early 30s, carries herself with the quiet certainty of someone who knows how many kinds of pain she's survived, and no longer feels the need to explain it to anyone. Her youngest girl is 10. The boy is 8. And your granddaughter, the eldest, is 15, taller than her mother now, with ink-stained fingers, and the habit of muttering Latin phrases when she's deep in thought. She comes home once every few months, each time more self-possessed, more woman than child. The first time she returns with news that she was paid a few coins for helping copy a legal document, your daughter stares at her like she's seeing a ghost, or a miracle, because that was never supposed to happen. Not here, not in this time, and especially not to a girl. She doesn't say it aloud, but you see it in the way she grips her daughter's hand, the quiet tears that slide down while she pretends to be focused on peeling turnips. She did it. She cracked the wall, even if only a little. But not everyone thinks it's worth celebrating. The miller's wife wrinkles her nose and says it's unwomanly for a girl to spend time with scrolls and parchment. The village priest offers a sermon that includes a very thinly veiled warning about the dangers of pride in women. And one of the older men scoffs openly. Books won't put bread on the table. Maybe not, but your granddaughter sends dried fruit-mended stockings and a note that says, "Tell the little ones I said hello, and that I miss Mama's stew." So yes, books are feeding them just fine. Still, you know, this little victory isn't permanent. One bad harvest, one unlucky accident, one angry neighbour with a grudge, and it could all unravel. That's the truth about life in the Middle Ages. You never coast. You survive in inches, and each inch is paid for in sweat. Even peace is fragile. One night, a fire breaks out in a neighbouring village. Just a thatch roof gone wrong, they say. But it spreads. Fast. Houses burn. A child dies. By the time word reaches your door, the panic is thick. Everyone checks their chimneys. Waters down hearths. No one sleeps deeply for days. Your daughter stations the children by the door during chores. If you see smoke, you shout, she says. Over and over. Until even the boy knows it like scripture. Because nothing is guaranteed. Not safety, not progress, not even a good night's sleep. Historians still argue how secure peasant families really were in rural communities. Some claim there was deep interdependence, that neighbours helped neighbours, pooling tools and time. Others paint a bleaker picture, one of mutual suspicion, petty rivalries, and limited resources, barely stretched across too many hungry mouths. You suspect both are true. The same woman who helps deliver your baby might also report you to the priest for unholy dreams. So your daughter stays careful, still helpful, still warm, but never naive, and she passes that wariness down. She teaches the younger girls how to patch roof leaks, set traps, sharpen blades. Teaches the boy how to bake bread and how to carry water without sloshing half of it down his tunic. People say it's odd training the children like that, but then they say everything is odd when a woman does it her own way. One day, a woman from another village comes seeking help. She's young, pale, clearly terrified. She's heard that your daughter knows remedies. She begs for something, anything, to stop a pregnancy. Your daughter hesitates. She remembers her own first time, the pain, the cold, the blood. She says nothing. She gives the woman pennyroyal quietly. No sermon, no judgment. After she leaves, your daughter scrubs her hands until they're raw. The next day, she hugs her children tighter. You don't ask her to explain. You already know. Later that week, a local noble rides through town. A minor lord with too much perfume and not enough manners. He eyes your granddaughter home for a visit with curiosity that sets your teeth on edge. Your daughter notices. She moves the girl inside before the second glance. Later, she asks the priest to write a fake engagement letter. Nothing binding, just a show of interest from a cousin's son far away. She posts it near the hearth like it's a warding charm. It works. The noble rides on without a word. Your granddaughter rolls her eyes at the drama. But she also doesn't leave the house alone for the rest of her stay. Because yes, she's bright, educated, independent. But she's still a girl in a world that values girls like hens, useful only when laying eggs. Your daughter knows that, so she builds protections out of whatever she can: lies, letters, stories, prayers. Whatever works. And then one day she gets a different kind of letter. It's from a woman she once helped deliver a teenager, then now married in a nearby village. The girl writes to say thank you, says her own mother died in childbirth, but she remembers how your daughter stayed with her for hours, whispering jokes, holding her hand, making her believe she wouldn't die. And she didn't. Now she wants to learn. She wants to be a midwife. Your daughter reads the letter 3 times, then folds it, tucks it into her apron, and says nothing for hours. When she finally speaks, it's only this: I think I'm going to teach her. And so another thread is tied. She begins training the girl quietly, sends herbs and diagrams, prepares her own eldest to assist on visits, begins recording details about births, not just names and dates, but things no one bothers to write down. Position, timing, recovery. It's not a ledger, not yet, but it's the start of one that might outlive her, because now she's thinking about what comes next, not just for her children, but for the women who will come after. That's what motherhood does to you in this era. It stretches you in both directions. You raise your own, but you're also always preparing someone else, someone you might never meet. And in that way, maybe you live longer. Maybe you matter more than the men who leave nothing but their names etched on stones no one visits. Your daughter isn't trying to be remembered, but she will be. By every woman who whispers her name in a cramped room, in pain, in fear, and hears back. You can do this. By the time your daughter turns 40, the village doesn't speak of her as that strange woman anymore. They call her the midwife, the healer. Sometimes even wise woman though, always with a small, reverent pause. Because that word wise carries weight. It brushes dangerously close to the realm of witches, depending on who's listening. But people say it anyway. Because at this point they need her more than they fear her. She's delivered over 40 babies, set dozens of broken bones, found ways to fight off coughs that used to kill entire households. She's the reason 2 neighboring women survived after nearly bleeding to death. And she's still mother to 4 living children. Grandmother to 2, though her eldest is so young looking you'd hardly guess. She has no title, no scroll from a monastery, no recognition from the church. But when someone cries out in the night, they call for her. Not the priest. Not even the actual doctor if one happens to pass through on a rare journey. No, they want her, because she shows up. She stays. She listens. She doesn't quote scripture when what you really need is a poultice and a strong hand to hold. And through all of this, through the lives, she saves the children. She raises the small rebellions she wages. She still carries the memory of her own births, like stones in her apron pocket. She never tells you directly, but you know she hasn't forgotten how hard it was, how scared she was, how little anyone did to help. That memory fuels her now. She tells every woman the truth. No softening, no false hope. It will hurt, she says. It may go badly. You may bleed. But you'll get through it if you breathe and push when I say and don't lose your head. Some call her cold, but they don't call her wrong. Historians still argue whether women in the Middle Ages had any real medical power. Some claim they were merely attendants their herbal law tolerated but not respected. Others insist that many villages relied almost entirely on female knowledge passed hand to hand like heirlooms because male doctors didn't stoop to women's matters. The truth likely lies somewhere between those camps. But here, your daughter is the medical authority. When the baker's wife gets a fever that won't break your daughter, is the one who steams onions, boils willow bark, and sits up with her through the second night. She survives. When the steward's own daughter miscarried early, and no one dared name it aloud, your daughter brought a cloth, and hot broth said nothing and sat there, while the girl wept until dawn. She knows where her power ends. She isn't arrogant. But she also knows this people live when she shows up, and die when she doesn't. That's enough. Meanwhile, your grandchildren are growing in leaps. The boy's voice has cracked. He now lifts bundles heavier than you, but still kisses his mother's cheek before leaving in the morning. He wants to be a carpenter, he says. Something about shaping wood makes him feel in charge of something. Your daughter approves. Better than shaping lives, she mutters. Wood doesn't scream. The younger girls. One is married now. The wedding was modest, just bread soup and a few songs. But your daughter made a wreath of dried lavender and whispered to her daughter, "Only marry if you want to." She did. The other girl is courting a cooper's son from a nearby town. Brighter prospects, maybe. And her eyes light up when she talks about barrel math of all things. The eldest, she's a scribe now, an official one, paid by landowners to draft contracts and tally grain stores. Her handwriting is neater than any man's. The church tolerates it because she's discreet and because her cousin's husband still vouches for her. She sends coins now, actual silver. Your daughter saves everyone, not to spend, but to show people. Look what she did. Look what a girl can do. You can't help it. You cry the first time you see them, because you remember her tiny screaming slippery in your arms. And now, here she is, bending time itself. Your daughter's hair is more silver than brown these days. Her hands are always busy, kneading, binding wounds, mending, teaching, writing tiny notes in a book she keeps tucked under the bed. You asked about it once. She said, just in case someone else ever wants to know what I know. A homemade textbook. No fanfare, no title. Just generations folded into parchment. And yet, for all her progress, all her victory, there's still danger. Always. One spring, a girl she helped through childbirth dies 3 days later. Infection. No warning. The priest blames immodest behavior. Suggests it's a punishment. Your daughter says nothing. But she stops attending mass for a month. Not out of spite, out of mourning. Because that's what never changes. The fragility of it all. One bad birth, one rumor, one priest with too much pride and everything could come undone. She knows this, and still she doesn't stop. Because what else is there? If she gives up, who takes her place? A man with a book and no bedside manner. A sermon where medicine should be. She'd rather die on her feet. And one winter she almost does. Fever, the worst kind. She collapses after tending a boy with open sores. Probably some mild plague strain. The family she helped survives, but your daughter burns for 4 days. You stay beside her the whole time, muttering prayers you don't even believe in, promising things you can't deliver. She sweats, shivers, rants, then sleeps. Then, on the 5th morning, opens her eyes and croaks. You're still ugly. You laugh so hard you scare the chickens. And from that moment on, she climbs back. Not fast, but steady. The whole village brings things. An egg, a strip of cloth, dried fruit. Even the priest mutters something like gratitude, because for a few nights, their everyone imagined life without her, and no one liked the picture. She takes it slow after that. Delegates, trains more girls, writes down every plant she's ever used. Not because she's giving up, but because now finally she's thinking about legacy, not in a noble way. Just this, if she doesn't pass it on, it dies with her, and that's unacceptable. So she keeps going, with cracked hands. With a heart stitched together from the people she saved and the ones she couldn't, with laughter still hiding in the corners of her mouth, and with the memory of her first birth, yours remember, etched so deep it might as well be carved in bone. Because for all her knowledge and healing, all her midwifery and resistance, she started as a girl on a straw mat, screaming, and somehow from there she built a life that mattered. Time moves differently now. It isn't rushing, it's settling. Like warm bread cooling on the hearthstone, like mist rising off fields at first light. Your daughter so fierce for so long moves slower these days. Not with weakness, but with earned deliberation. Each movement is chosen, each word considered. She's in her 50s now, and people listen when she speaks. Not just because of the babies she's caught or the wounds she's wrapped, but because she's seen more of life than most can bear. And she remembers all of it. Your grandchildren are grown. Your granddaughter. The scribe visits often always with new ink on her fingers and a new opinion on parchment taxes. She laughs when she sees the book under your daughter's bed, the midwifery journal, and always says the same thing. One day, someone important is going to find this and completely miss the point. And maybe they will. Maybe they'll skim through it for folk remedies or statistical oddities. But they'll miss the real value. The scratched margins where your daughter made notes about which women wanted to sing during labour. The odd entry that just says, she survived. Don't ask me how. The way your daughter writes down, not just the facts, but the feelings. Because this isn't just medicine, it's memory. And memory is survival, especially for women like her. Like you, like the ones still to come. Your daughter teaches now more than she heals. She still answers calls when they come, but there's a younger woman doing most of the running. The baker's niece. Good hands. Soft voice. A little nervous, but she'll grow into her bones just like your daughter did. She reminds you of her, honestly. Same stubborn streak. Same quiet refusal to be dismissed. And that's how you know things won't end when you go. They'll ripple. Your daughter even starts an odd sort of tradition, writing letters to babies she delivers. Not for them really, but for their mothers. She leaves the letters tucked inside swaddles or baskets. Short things. You were strong. You did it. Don't forget that. Sometimes even drawings of flowers. People cry when they read them. One woman folded hers into a tiny box and wore it around her neck until she died. It's funny, isn't it? How something so small can mean so much. But your daughter knows better than anyone women don't get statues. They get stories and letters and tired hands that whisper knowledge forward generation by generation. Historians still argue whether midwives left any lasting impact, whether they were simply placeholders until real medicine arrived, whether anything they did actually changed outcomes. But what they miss is this. Sometimes impact doesn't look like records. It looks like someone being alive who wouldn't have been. Your daughter's body is beginning to betray her in small ways. She winces when she stands. Her knees mutter curses when the weather changes. And sometimes she forgets things: her apron, the name of a new child, where she put that blessed jar of dried sage. But her mind's still sharp, sharper than any knife in the house. She knows which families need help before they ask, knows which couples are struggling, which girls are afraid. She watches, listens, and sometimes says just enough to make someone feel seen. That too is healing. You still live with her. Your bones ache more than they don't, but she always makes room for you beside the fire. Always brings you the softest part of the bread or the cup without a chip. And when you ask her once what she thinks her life means, she doesn't answer right away. She stirs the stew, looks out the window, and says, "Finally, I think it means I tried." That's enough. Because trying, really trying, in a world built to silence women, dismiss pain, and turn every birth into a roll of the dice, that's defiance. And defiance is a kind of legacy too. You watch the village evolve. Slowly, yes, but unmistakably. Women help each other openly now. They speak of herbs without whispering. The priest no longer preaches quite so hard against female cleverness. Probably because his own sister now serves as the village's assistant healer, and no one's willing to challenge her. Your daughter's children care for her the way she once cared for you. The boy now, a man with calloused hands and a barrel chest, still kisses her forehead. Still calls her mama like he did at 5. He built her a stool with armrests and a blanket box that doesn't creak. The girls, fierce as ever. One oversees grain inventories. The other has become the unofficial confidant of nearly every married woman under 30. The family you once feared wouldn't survive. They run things now, quietly, but with strength. And your daughter, she smiles more these days. Laughs too, though her voice has softened, like warm wool. She likes to sit near the fire and tell stories to the younger girls. Not just about childbirth, but about survival. How you made food last, how to read the sky for frost, how to navigate men with more power than sense, and always how to hold your ground in a world that never planned for you to thrive. Because that's what it meant to give birth in the Middle Ages. It meant everything was stacked against you. No control, no comfort, no guarantees, just pain, dirt, and luck. And still you pushed through. Bled, screamed, cried, and came out the other side not just alive but powerful. The truth is, you weren't supposed to survive this story. But here you are. And because of you, because of her, so many others did. So yeah, giving birth in the Middle Ages. It sucked. Hard. But you did it anyway. And somehow, that makes you the strongest thing in the whole world. And now the fire dims. The air cools and the night hushes around you like a soft wool cloak. You've walked through pain, through ash, through the breathless silence between one heartbeat and the next. You've felt the weight of centuries and the lightness of a newborn's cry cutting through the dark. You've watched a daughter become a healer, a mother become a legend, and a world shaped by quiet resistance. The world of the Middle Ages may have been brutal, unforgiving, and steeped in silence for those who bled behind closed doors. But within that silence, there was resilience. There was connection. There was you. So as you drift, now breathe deeply. Picture the fire flickering low, your hands warmed by its last glow. Feel the smooth grain of the stool beneath you. The familiar scents, herbs drying overhead, stew, cooling on the hearth, the faint smoke and lavender on your daughter's shawl. And just outside the door, a small world continues, children laughing in sleep, the wind rustling the thatched roof, Someone whispering a bedtime story, not so different from this one. You've made it through. The hard part's over. The night is yours now. Let the quiet hold you. Let the strength you've earned settle deep in your bones. And remember, what you carried and what you built was never just about surviving. It was about matter. It was about being seen. You were never alone in that room. And you never will be. Sweet dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.